one of the last questions I'll ask you is kind of, what is the next step for you as an educator? So looking at your IAT score, the way the scores come out, if you had a score of 0, which nobody out of all the 300 and something surveys, nobody had a 0. But if you had a 0, that would be no bias towards white or black. So it's almost like a extremely neutral, unbiased person, which nobody did have a 0. Now, some are close to 0. So if you had a positive score, going from, say, 0 to 1, and some people had greater than 1, but 1 would be a high bias and 0 would be no bias. So there's like a range between, 0 and 1. So that will give you kind of your level. And there's not a label as far as a high bias, medium bias, low bias, but you could kind of categorize that on your own. If we look towards the negative side, so if you have a negative IAT score, it's the same thing. So positive, 0 to 1 would be a bias towards whites. So you're more, I don't want to say pro, but I'll say pro for this. So you're more pro African American over white. Your preference would be for African American over white if you have a positive score. If you have a negative score, then you're more biased towards African Americans. So you have a preference towards European Americans, and that will go from 0 to 1 as well. So if you have a score close to -1, then that's going to be a high bias against African Americans. So that your preference is towards white over black. Whereas if you had a positive 1, your preference is higher towards African American over white. So thinking about your score that I emailed you, and S. Barbara, I couldn't remember if I emailed it to you, so I just sent it to you in a chat. What do you think about your score? Do you think it's accurate? I just kind of want to know your reactions, your feelings, emotions when you think about what that score means.
I think mine is pretty accurate. I don't know if you want me to expound.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm obviously a Black woman, so.
Can I ask you, why do you say you're obviously a Black woman?
Well, I have my picture on here. I don't think I would have another race of a Bitmoji.
Gotcha. You know what? It's funny because I didn't even notice the picture because I knew who you were, but I didn't click with, I see her picture there. All I see is hello friends. That's all I know.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm in there. So yeah, I'm a Black woman and mine was, the positive side. So just from, I guess, my life experiences, of course, I would be biased. Well, I wouldn't say of course, but, with my life experience, I feel like I'm biased to my own race. If that makes sense.
Okay, so you feel like you're more, so really we'd say you have biases against, say, non-African American or white specifically, or how would you?
I wouldn't say I have bias against, and I'll speak to when I was taking the survey. It was really hard for me on the part where it was like, if you see a Black face, then it's automatically unpleasant. And if you see a white face, it's automatically this. Like, that part was really hard for me. So I was like, I don't know how this is going to affect me, because I would automatically, on the Black face, I would hit the side and they'd be like, oh, that's wrong because I put pleasant. And so it would be like, well, no, it's supposed to be unpleasant. And it's like, well, to me, it's not. And then when it came around flip, I was like, oh, okay, it makes sense now. Because I was like, wait a minute, what did I sign myself up for?
Right. And, it really looks at how quickly. So the way that comes out is you are quicker to put Black with pleasant than you were white with pleasant, if that makes sense.
Well, it wasn't either one way or the other. It was forced. If you see a Black one and it's also on the same letter as unpleasant. And it's like, well, I don't want to put unpleasant because it's not unpleasant to me.
Right.
So that's kind of where I was. But then when I saw that it came up, switch on the next one, I was like, okay, so I'm not being forced to be biased. It's just now that you explained not the algorithm, but like basically how it calculated it. Now,
yeah, the method of it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
My score was not surprising to me. It was about what I expected. I've done the test before, so I knew what the test was doing. I did notice as I was taking it that it was easier for me to get right answers and go and get the right answer quickly when the positive, when the pleasant adjectives were paired with white people, and I'm a white woman. So I did notice, I mean, it wasn't humongous, but I did recognize that it was there. And, I grew up in Chicago in an all white neighborhood for the most part. And Chicago has always been a very racial, it's not even just racially segregated. I mean, it is racially segregated, but it's even nationality segregated. I mean, they segregate their white people. I mean, you've neighborhoods that are, by country. So, it wasn't surprising. It's what I grew up with, and it's been something that, I recognized, years ago, and, I work on it. It's something that it's there. I know it's there.
I had no expectations in taking it. I'm surprised about my score because, due to growing up in A-Leaf, I don't really, I would think that I would be more inclined to being biased towards white people because, when I transitioned from A-Leaf to Spring Branch, I just noticed like how there was a huge difference in how whites treated everybody and how, a multicultural atmosphere was just like everybody was kind of accepted. So I'm surprised about my score in saying that I'm biased towards African Americans because I would have thought it would have been the other way around. And also I was taking the test during, a lunch period where I was having tutoring, so maybe that has something to do with it. But that does shock me that the test shows that I'm biased in a negative manner towards African Americans.
I appreciate y'all's honesty. So in my research, I'm looking at the IAT and also paired it with the Rivik scale, which is actually renamed from the blatant and subtle prejudice scale, which has not really been used here in the United States. But a group of researchers changed the name to the Rivik scale, and Rivik just stands for rejection, intimacy, values, emotions, and culture. And it takes, I can't remember how many items the blatant and subtle prejudice scale had, or racism scale, but the Rivik prejudice scale, they condensed it down to 15. And so what you do in the scale is you collapse the 15 into those 5 categories, and you get a score for each number, from strongly disagree to strongly agree. Each one gets a value, and then you look at the totals from those 5 scales, and then you get a final rating. So I messaged you all on a chat here this morning on Zoom with your Rivik scale. And I'll get your reactions to that before I go a little bit more detail because I don't want to skew your thinking. So looking at your Rivik scale, what it shows is your scale would indicate a prejudice towards African Americans. And so what are your reactions to your Rivik scale? Not just separate, but also looking at your IAT score with your Rivik prejudice scale score. What are your thoughts, feelings, reactions, emotions with that?
I guess I'm not quite sure what the different levels mean.
Okay, good. So I'm glad you said that. So you can go from low to low medium to medium, medium high, and then high. So there's kind of 5 ranges of what level of prejudice, just based on that scale, out of those 15 items, when you collapse them all into a level, a score, just shows your level of prejudice towards African Americans.
I'm confused. Okay, sorry. Okay, so it goes from low prejudice towards, and then to
all
high
the way to high.
Okay.
And it's So it's different than the IAT as far as you get